Hey, you are now listening to the Graceway Podcast. Let's talk.
Hey, Graceway fam, Pastor Tim here. So excited to have you join us. I'm with Pastor Todd, who just preached an incredible message on just a small, irrelevant topic, right? How to deal with our anxiety and stress.
Yeah.
Incredibly important just with the season that we've been through with COVID and tension in every direction, right? So I thought you did a fantastic job helping us in that. Why don't we just dive right into it, right? So you did this kind of equation, this paradigm. You said that all of us deal with fear. Fear is sometimes a helpful thing, right? It helps you avoid the right hook, avoid the truck coming down the street, avoid food that would give you food poisoning, all those kind of things. But that fear plus uncertainty equals anxiety, which I thought was a really both profound and simple way to kind of help people understand where this is coming from. So maybe dive a little bit deeper in that, around that, how you think about that, and why that's such an important thing for us to understand.
Yeah, I think that a lot of times we don't want to be afraid, when oftentimes like fear is a gift from God that helps us live in a way that is healthy and it's good. We learn things and our brain helps us with that, and we think when we're dealing with anxiety that we're just afraid. It's like we're not afraid. We're afraid and we don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So I think the anxiety, the uncertainty is what makes us anxious. Because if we were just afraid, we'd either not do the thing or we'd do something to make it better.
Yeah.
But when we don't know what the result's going to be, or we don't have framework for what comes after, then we're just left with all this fear-based energy and nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
And so we throw ourselves into things that really don't help our situation at all, but momentarily make us feel better. And so it leads us into, bad relationships. It leads us into bad health habits. It leads us in all kinds of different things that our fear trigger leads to really destructive things.
Yeah.
Because we just want to feel better, even though we don't know what to do with it.
Yeah. Yeah, as I'm listening to you talk, I'm thinking, especially in the West, we already have an interesting relationship with fear, right? Like you talked in the second service about, the Caucasian community's interest in jumping out of planes and how that's kind of an especially white expression, which is true. But we do have this kind of no fear. I'm going to walk through my fear. So but in either case, it's bad, right? It's either holding you down or it's keeping you from something. And you're kind of trying to say, no, fear is typically, it's a God-given pretty good thing.
Yeah, fear's okay. It's okay to be afraid.
It's okay.
I used to in middle school have the no fear T-shirts.
Yeah.
But I was like 13.
That's right.
I was very afraid.
Yeah, right. But look at my shirt. I'm not afraid.
Yeah. It's like so it's kind of this. It's been marketed to us.
It has. Yeah.
To not be afraid of things. It's like, well, you don't have to be. You can be courageous in the midst of fear.
Yeah.
So you can have courage. I mean, everyone, the bravest people or have heard about, had to overcome fear.
Yeah.
But fear was, and it wasn't bad or wrong that they were fearful.
Right.
It helped them understand what the next move was.
Yeah.
And then as they did that, they began to realize how to move in the midst of fear. What anxiety does, though, is because there's nothing to do.
Yes, that's good.
There isn't something to do. There isn't something to be courageous in.
Yeah.
Because the fear that's being triggered, it's a perceived threat, not an actual threat.
Yeah.
And so we're left with, well, how do I handle this? What do I do? And so we begin to go to other things, thinking that's going to help us deal with the fear.
Yeah.
But ultimately don't really lead us to health.
Yeah, there is a clarity in fear, at least, right?
Right.
That there often isn't an anxiety. When you do counseling, you're talking to somebody, what are you afraid of? Right? What are you worried about? Well, I don't know, just a lot of different things.
And I think that, in my I'm sure a lot of families have dealt with this. We dealt with it in my family where especially with COVID,
Yeah.
nothing was certain.
Yeah, correct.
I mean, the early days of COVID, it was like, you know, don't sneeze, don't breathe, don't touch, don't,
Right.
you know, don't touch your face.
Yeah.
Don't. We were sanitizing our groceries before they came in the house.
Yeah. Same.
You know, and so like, if you're prone to fear, if you're prone to anxiety, that just sends you
Yeah.
spiraling because you're fighting an invisible enemy.
Right.
You don't know what to do, and so I think it's even more heightened now. And then that really plays itself out in like physical manifestations. Anxiety can take root physically and through just whether it's tension or, you know, gut issues that come from just unreleased tension.
Yeah.
Because I think I said that, you know, when you conquer fear, usually there's like a shout or like some movement you do, and that expends that nervous energy.
Right.
With anxiety, you're just left to hold all that in,
Yeah.
and no place to put it.
Yeah.
And so it begins to, you know, it destroys you.
Yeah. This past season, it has been interesting. You kind of feel this overlying spiritual warfare, kind of capitalizing on our undealt with fears and anxieties. And because we don't know how to deal with it internally. I'm just aiming at it. I just need to aim this at somebody, right?
And I think that I didn't say this in the message, but there was this on 60 Minutes this past week. This lady came out, whistleblower about Facebook, and then Facebook shut down. And everybody's lives ended for a day, you know. And but basically saying like that there's a lot of profit to be made in keeping you focused on negative things.
Yeah.
Because you feel like you're conquering something.
Yeah.
So doing all that, spending time on sites being negative, takes this anxiety, this anxious energy,
and monetizes it.
And they're like, if we can just keep you anxious and angry,
Yeah.
we can make more money.
Absolutely.
And then
You're
you think,
predictable at that point. Yeah.
but we've now made it a behavior that we think is mitigating this uncertainty and fear.
Yeah.
So we just keep, and it's in your hand every second. So you just keep going. It's so easy. I feel anxious. Boom! I start scrolling.
Yeah.
And I think I heard a comedian say recently, like, there's going to be someday in the near future where we're going to say like, we're going to look at cell phone usage like smoking.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Like,
I saw that.
can you believe we let kids be on iPads back in the day? Just
True.
Like, can you believe we cartoons market cigarettes?
Yeah.
And so I think that's our anxiety is being marketed to.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it, toward the cigarette social media thing, really the issue that got the tobacco companies in trouble was their knowledge of the damage and their monetizing of the damage. The exact same thing is happening with these social media.
Yeah. So I think we talked about like knowing that, being aware of that, and knowledge is power, right?
Yeah, right.
It's like, okay, well, what if I could replace some of my tendencies to go to social media? Now that I'm aware of it, let me like map this out a little bit. Okay, when I feel this, I do this. And what are, instead of doing that, what if I like call a friend? It's like there are healthy ways, because we're not getting away from anxiety.
Right.
So we got to figure out ways to take it and adjust our response to it.
Yeah.
And as we start doing that and finding a payoff, then we'll actually create new pathways.
Yeah. Yeah, and just for the Christian community, we have to come to a place where we understand you're being led, right? And not in redemptive ways. So a Christian response is to either take back that genre or that environment for redemptive purposes, or figure out other behaviors that are redemptive. I'm not going to be led in this way. I'm going to lead in this way. And so many times we don't understand the power that our faith gives us, right? The freedom that we can have and the redemptive behaviors and community that can get created when we say, oh, wait, I'm being led to do a certain thing that isn't good for me, isn't good for my soul, isn't good for my community. So I need to figure out different ways to maybe utilize those tools or different responses that are good for me and those around me. And I'm free to do that in Jesus, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's good. That's good. So you talked on this a little bit. You talked about some of us, we have these funky relationships or these toxic relationships, and I go back to them when I need them rather than going back to a healthy. And you referenced small groups.
Yeah.
Which is such an important thing here at Graceway and such an important thing in the Bible, right?
Yeah.
And so help me through, because some of us, you don't want to be that person that's always talking about how worried they are,
Sure.
right? And so some of us, we don't want to confess anxieties or sins or those kind of things because we're afraid of, being needy or vulnerable or those kind of things. But talk to me about dealing in community with your anxiety. What should it look like?
Yeah.
Pastor us through, how do I take worries to community? How do I frame those worries? And if somebody's coming to you who is worried, how should you lead them?
Yeah, that's a lot. I think, so like one, the answer is not, like if you're like, well, I don't know how to do that, the answer is not to avoid it.
Right.
I think that sometimes like, well, that sounds like a lot, so I'm not going to do any of it.
Yeah.
Like, I'd rather you like make some mistakes in trying to do it than just say, I have social anxiety, so I don't want to go to be with people.
Right.
So even if you do deal with social anxiety, it's like, then find a person and call them instead of going. There's got to be a relational connectivity.
Yeah.
Because you can't bear one another's burdens if you aren't with one another.
Right. That's right.
So I think that one, there is like a fear of. I feel like everything is like we don't go to the small group because of fear of being seen as needy.
Right.
I think it's really probably a fear of being rejected.
Yeah, sure.
Actually putting myself out there and then nobody receiving that.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, well, I have to overcome one fear just to get to where I can share my fears.
Right.
So I think that in that, because you said like, well, it's not just important here at this church, it's important in the Bible.
Yeah.
So I think you realize like, I'm just going to trust God that what he says is right.
Right.
And then I'm going to step into that and see if he's faithful.
Yeah.
Because there's lots of reasons that we can sit here and we can therapize each other all the time and say
Therapize, is that the act of providing
therapy? Yeah, therapize.
We're just out here creating words.
That's in there.
Right?
It's very Paul did it. I'll do it. So yeah, we therapize each other.
Yeah.
And we're like, well, you don't have to be. I know God's word says this, but you feel this, so you don't have to. It's like, well, no, just test God in that. Like, he says you need to bear one another's burdens. Let me see what that looks like. Yeah. So then you get in there, and you're going to make some missteps in that. You're going to overshare. Yeah. Maybe you undershare. Mm-hmm. But the right people, one will handle your oversharing, and will ask insightful questions at your undersharing. Yeah. But I think maybe just as therapeutic as sharing your burdens is shouldering someone else's.
Absolutely.
So you get in there, you bring what you think is just a heap of trouble. Yeah. And then you find out somebody's going through something that you don't even know how they're making it. Yeah. And you're able to pray for them, and you realize that in the face of your anxiety, you're able to minister to someone else's. That's why it's bear one another's burdens. Yeah. Because it's not go there so people can bear your burdens. Mm. Like, you have a role. And I think that your role in shouldering someone else's stuff actually ministers to your stuff. Yeah. Either maybe you realize it wasn't as serious, or, I think pastors do this all the time. Like, we share advice that we should take.
Why would you say that? Pastor Todd.
We tell people stuff. I don't know anyone who does that. No, neither of us. Pastors that are listening right now.
Absolutely.
We tell people things that we really should be doing. Yeah. So when you minister to people who are human and have problems, you're actually telling people the very things you need to do. Yeah. And in that, it's so much healing that can happen, but our fear keeps us from engaging in that, and it keeps us from a blessing. It keeps us from blessing others, and it keeps us from being blessed by. We talked last week about walking in purpose. Mm-hmm. Like, part of your purpose is to care for one another, and so that looks like, hey, I have problems, you have problems, you hear some of mine. I hear some of yours.
Yeah.
We help each other. And it doesn't fix us. I think that's the thing is like, well, that doesn't fix it. No. Like, it's not going to fix it, but it's going to help. And I think if we can find help, then we can find healing.
Yeah, and there's some of us that we're so stuck around anxiety that we can't even conceive of a way to fix it. But so it's just take a step, and in the step you get more perspective, and in the new perspective you might be able to find progress. I think just to help people who say I have someone's coming to me. You and I share an appreciation for stand-up comedy. There's not much like preaching in our culture, but stand-up comedy.
Close enough.
Close enough, yeah. So, one of the best ever just released his, and he ends that show talking about empathy. And we always think about empathy as something that I give you empathy. But empathy is good for both of us, because for me to get to a place where I am able to give you empathy, I have to get to a place of health and perspective that allows me to appreciate that even if I don't understand or I don't agree, I can still be helpful to you. And I think that sometimes we think this person's coming and worrying me, and either I don't have it to give, I don't know what to say, or I have to conjure this. No, just listen, just be present, just make yourself available, just show some empathy. We are living in one of the craziest dearths of empathy I've ever seen in the public setting right now, around politics, economics, race, sexuality. Just this, you're either with us or we're against you thing. And it's killing us. It's killing our relationships. Just a little bit of empathy goes a long way. And when I have it to give you, it's good for me and it's good for you.
Yeah.
Especially around anxiety. So you talked about the trigger, behavior, reward, repeat.
Yes.
So I'm triggered, it produces a behavior. That behavior has a reward baked into it. The reward keeps me coming back, so I repeat it.
Yes.
So unpack that a little bit more for us, kind of in the spiritual setting.
Yeah, so I read that in a book from a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
Talking about just the way the brain works.
Yeah.
And we build these pathways. The anxiety becomes habit forming for us. And to say that, you say that, and then you look around, you're like, oh yeah, it's
Absolutely.
everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere. We medicate with lots of different things. And typically it's around anxiety, fears we have that we can't fix. And so we try to fix them with things that don't actually fix anything.
Yeah.
So I think that it's a very spiritual thing too. I mean, like God tells us, like, don't be conformed to the ways of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind.
Yeah.
Like God sees the importance of your thought life, your mind, your feelings, all those things. God's like, yeah, these are important. So renew your mind.
Yeah.
You see what the world does. The world experiences a feeling or a fear, and that there's uncertainty in the world. And so they run to things.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we would see in biblical language, we'd see like idols.
Yeah.
We would form idols to worship and say, like, this thing's going to fix my situation. And God's like, what? You made that thing.
Right.
I mean, it sounds silly to say it but like we bake our idols. Like we bake things, and like lemon meringue, such and such is going to, I don't know. Just went with it.
Yeah. Right.
This will fix the thing I'm feeling.
Yeah.
You go to a dispensary, there's a million different things you can, I mean.
There we go. Now we're getting into the.
You go to a dispensary, I'm like, it's gummies, it's brownies, it's. And whatever. I'm not. This isn't that moment.
This isn't that talk. Yeah.
This isn't that talk. But it's like, you think you can't self-medicate with. You can do it with cigarettes. You can do it with alcohol. You can do it with weed. You can do it with.
And you can do it with good things.
With good, sure, good things. Some people would say.
Yeah.
Some people would say, this is the good thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, people throw themselves into their kids' sports lives.
Yeah. Right.
There's a whole show called Dance Moms.
Right.
It's like, well, being a good mom, being a present mom is good.
It's good, yeah.
But you are satisfying something with that. Yeah. And then when you get any kind of positive reward, your brain takes note of that.
Yeah.
You're like, ooh, that was good. Let's do that again.
Yeah.
And so I think when you start recognizing like this is how when I'm triggered in my anxiety or fear, worries or anxious thoughts,
Yeah.
I think it's important to write it out.
Yes. Agreed.
I run to these things.
Yeah.
And then seeing it and be like, what's a positive replacement for this?
Yeah.
And at least it doesn't take your anxiety away, but it begins to direct it in a healthy
Right.
pathway. But sometimes in all these things, you still need help to realize those things. You're not going to, in your own power,
Right.
figure that out
Right.
and then stick to it.
Right.
It's a supernatural thing to even have the revelation of like,
Yeah.
let me pause, let me reflect in this. You're going to need God's help to even identify those things.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to need people to hold you accountable and say like, hey, I've noticed this about myself. Would you check on me once a week and
Yeah.
ask me how it's going? And you're probably going to blow it the first like couple dozen times of trying to get better. But then over time, as you are consistent and stay in community, and then you start finding progress and success.
Yeah. Yeah, and toward, just trying to pastor people real practically, I think you sit on with a piece of paper, you write trigger, behavior, reward.
Yes.
Just write them all out. And these are the things that trigger me.
Yes.
These are the behaviors I go to. This is what I think the benefit is.
Right.
And just to kind of pray through those things, right, is a really, really helpful, because we typically focus on the reward.
Right.
But it's the whole sequencing.
Yeah, it's a pathway.
It's the whole sequencing thing. Okay, so I want to throw you a curveball. We didn't talking about this. I want to talk about counseling.
Yeah.
Last thing here. You talked about going to counseling, therapy, all of those. I've been very honest with our church. I have 3 counselors, right? I've got my, I call him my pipe smoker. So he's, how do you feel about that? He's very kind of Socratic. I have my kind of scientific, he's got all these different modes and models. And then I have I call my mean counselor, because he's the one that will get in my face and say, no, that isn't who you are. That isn't what God says. And just my personality, I need all 3. Someone to help me think, someone to kind of diagnose, and someone to just to confront.
Yeah.
And I've done that for many, many, many years, and whatever level of health I experience is directly tied to that. So I'm going to ask you just a shotgun series of questions here.
Okay.
Why is counseling important? Number
Right.
one. What do you think keeps people from it? And what is a benefit? Like, why would you encourage people to do it?
Okay.
Did I say, is that the first one? I'm messing up. Let's just say,
What?
why should somebody do it, and what would keep somebody from it?
Yeah. I think the reason why somebody should do it is the same reason why most people should take their cars to a mechanic. Because you show up and you're like, it's going wah, wah, and they're like, oh yeah, that's the this.
That's the this. That's the doohickey.
Yeah, so when you come in and you start talking about what's going on in your life,
Yeah.
a counselor, therapist is going to be able to hear what you're saying and know what's really going on.
Yeah.
And help get you there without necessarily just telling you, go do X, Y, and Z.
Yes.
So you think you're just sharing thoughts and feelings and pasts and emotions or whatever. They have the knowledge to take those things and help you gain understanding.
Yes, that's good.
So I think that's one is like you understand how you feel, you understand what happened, but you don't have understanding.
Yeah.
And so a counselor can give you understanding and perspective in that. And the things that keep us away from it, for some of us, it's like cultural stigma.
Yes.
It's like if I tell somebody, or if people know that I'm going to therapy, they're going to think X.
Right.
And X is what's keeping you. But it's really not even.
And even though that's true, we don't want people.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't want people, and so, I mean, I don't want to get like super spiritual, but like we just have a fear of man issue.
Sure.
It's like, I'm afraid of what they think, which is more cowardly than just admitting you have problems. Like we think that if they know I go to this, that makes me a punk.
Yeah.
But really, like the fact that you're worrying about what they think about you going, that's what makes you the punk. You know what I'm saying? Like, and you need a therapist to tell you that.
Yeah.
So I think what keeps us away from a lot of times, so that's some people have stigma around it. I mean, how many people do you know that ain't been to a doctor in a decade?
Mm-hmm.
I'm busy. I'm here. I'm living. You know, I got stuff going on. I'm busy, and so you just put it in the back of your mind, and like it's something maybe you're open to it. You're not anti-therapy, but you let busyness become the reason why you don't go. And so I just think that it's not, and with a lot of things, unless you're intentional and prioritize it, you're going to find things that fill up your schedule to make you not do it.
Yeah, I always tell people, just choose to go before you have to go. Because for most of us, our undealt with stuff, if I'm not in community, I'm isolated, I'm full of fear and anxiety, I have certain traumas. Those things don't have a shelf life. They stay in your body, they stay in your soul, they affect your relationships. And at a certain point, it spills.
Oh, yeah.
It spills out into your marriage, it spills out with your kids, it creates this doom loop. And because we believe that we're both forgiven and free in Jesus, we want people to live with freedom. But God says, look, if you're ever going to be free, you have to make some decisions now to be in pursuit of that, being in community, confessing to one another. And I think that everybody walking the earth needs, call it whatever you want, a mentor. Like you said, for a while it was a counselor, but it was really a therapist.
Right.
So a coach, I need a coach, I need a mentor, I need a counselor, I need a therapist, I need a doctor, right?
Yeah.
And I always say to people, if it's really that big of a deal to you, just tell a couple people that you know you're very safe with, I'm going to, and have them check in with you. Keep it a little bit of a secret until you see the benefit of it.
Right.
But don't let somebody else choose your level of freedom for you. Mm-hmm. Somebody that isn't thinking as much about you as you're thinking about them. Be brave, step through some of those fears, and go.
Yeah, I think that in the Christian world, I think that's mostly probably who's watching this, is we hyper-spiritualize our mental health. It's me and Jesus. Yeah. And Jesus is like, go to therapy. Like, right. You got me.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, go see the therapist I created.
Yeah, that's right.
He's like, Jesus, like, you see what I did with that person, the gift I gave them?
Yeah.
And, I set them up to be helpful to you. So, we're rocking with Jesus, and Jesus is begging us to go to get therapy. Yeah. So, I think it's a kind of a new dawn, a new day in Christendom, where we say, no, this is me going to therapy is a spiritual act. Yeah. It's me saying that, like, my mind needs to be renewed.
Yes. And
I spend every hour of every day in the world that I'm not supposed to be conformed by. Yeah. So I'm gonna need some help. Yeah. And Jesus is like, here's my word, here's my spirit, here's my people, here's some professionals I put around you to go get busy and do this.
I think that's a good place to stop. If you haven't listened to Pastor Todd's sermon today, you can go to visitgraceway.org. Both services were fantastic, incredibly helpful. I also just want to say, man, if you need help finding a counselor, we'd love to help you with that. We have a list of highly qualified, Jesus-loving professionals who would love to serve you in that way. And lastly, if you're not in a small group, please, if you're a part of Graceway, get into a small group. If you're part of another church, get around community. Get with people that you trust, that you love. There's freedom to be experienced in Jesus, but he uses his word and his people to do it. And so I hope you'll take those steps. Be brave. We love you. We'll be back here next week. Until then, we're praying for you, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks for tuning into the Graceway Experience. Hope we can talk again sometime.